Yes. So I think up until this moment, you could say Moses had absolute complete trust in Aaron. I think that's a good observation. Absolutely. Utter, yes, utter and complete disappointment. Bewilderment to start with. What did they do to you? And then utter and complete disappointment. Um, we made the point at the fellowship meal where the 70 elders and Aaron and his sons are brought up they're on the mountain, not to where Moses went, but they are on the mountain and they have that meal with the Lord and they see the feet of the Lord in that glorified way. And Aaron was told, and the elders were told to wait there while the people are down at the foot of the mountain. And it's in some way, either Aaron gives up and comes down the mountain, or the people call to him, and Aaron stops waiting on the mountain, and he goes down, and this all happens. Um, there's problems there, and the statement where we see it in this account, we see it in the Deuteronomy account, we see it in the Acts account, where they say, "As for this man Moses, we don't know what's happened to him." So what think about Aaron's mindset for a second. As for this man Moses, we don't know what's happened to him. Was that something that Aaron was already thinking, or like the people say, hey, Moses has been gone a while, you make us a god. What's in his heart at this time? We make the point, Moses, meekest man. We see his meekness constantly, and he's all but that one time that's going to happen later, he's always giving the glory to God. He's always stepping back and making sure people are looking to God. But in this moment, it feels like Aaron sees an opportunity for himself. I think that's part of what's going on. Yes, sir.
We talked about the symbolism before with the fellowship to the Garden of Eden. This is a lot very symbolic to the fall. And Aaron, Moses is sort of taking God's position when God questioned Adam. And now Moses is questioning Aaron, and Aaron sort of does the same thing. He's cowardly, pushes it all, sort of blaming other people instead of accepting his own responsibility. And I think largely this is just symbolic throughout the Bible of man's ultimate falling to sin. We're always going to fall short because we're not being courageous when we need to be courageous. Aaron needed to be courageous, tell them no. Adam needed to be courageous, even tell her no. And they didn't, and then they blame. They try to force the blame on.
It also sounds a lot to me like what Saul does later when he drops the ball on his command. The people made me do it. Basically, it sounds a lot like that.
I didn't create an image.
Yep.
It just came out.
Well, up until that statement, Aaron had said truth, hadn't he? I mean, he was making excuses, but he was also saying truth up until that point. And this is one of those things that, again, there's huge lessons for us, because I think, can we not all see ourselves in Aaron's shoes sometimes? Can we see ourselves in Aaron's shoes where, we know we've messed up, and here is the consequences of our actions they're coming at us, man. We're about to deal with the consequences of our actions. And we start rationalizing and framing things. How do I frame this so I don't look so bad? And then sometimes going just that extra step and actually lying about it.
Okay. They're in a position of leadership, whether it's your family, whether it's Adam.
So I'm going to say that again. The headship is a heavy burden. Aaron had been left in charge, and here they come to him. There's a crisis. As for this man Moses, we don't know. Make us a god. It wasn't Aaron's idea; it was their idea. Make us a god. And he had an opportunity there to be courageous, to say the right thing, to put his foot down, and he doesn't. Why doesn't he? Why doesn't he put his foot down? Why doesn't he stand up to them?
Now later on, there's no issue with him and Miriam basically saying, hey, God talks to us too, it's not just Moses.
That's right. That's going to happen really soon, actually.
So it may be a similar attitude to that.
I think so. I think we're learning something about Aaron here that makes him very different from Moses. Makes him very different from Moses.
Moses, on countless occasions, had the opportunity to take the glory for himself, and as I say, he does, clearly on that one occasion make that mistake. This is Aaron's. It's a moment to shine. It's a moment for him to be what he needs to be, and he fails. He fails. Our book, I think the book worded it. He proves himself a compromiser. And I'll go ahead and read. It says, not unlike many religious leaders today who tell people what they want to hear, provide them the type of worship they want instead of what God commanded. Don't you think that's an important point? The people come to him and say, make us a God. And instead of putting his foot down, despite the consequences, and say, no, we cannot do that. He gives them what they want. They've got the itching ears, and he's like, I'll be the one to scratch it. I'll be the one to scratch it. I'll tell you what you want to hear. It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to do that when you're in a conversation with somebody and you can start to feel, religious conversation, you can start to feel we're about to be on different sides of this issue. I can see they're over here. I believe the truth is here, and we can start to feel that. It's so easy to just tell them what they want to hear, to try to avoid the conflict. Yep.
Also, so his anger was justified like that. Obviously, God did.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Story that happens throughout the Bible.
No doubt. I feel like there's a lot of points. I'm sorry. Yes.
So, we're also talking about Aaron and talking about his reaction here at this moment. But please understand, this is also the man that God's going to choose to be the high priest. Right? So we can all have these moments.
Yep.
And none of us are above it. Mm-hmm. But yet, what's what you turn around and do afterwards. Now, does Aaron sin later? Absolutely. We talk about Miriam, when he goes with Miriam, it tells most of us things goes through. We think that's probably a moment of weakness, but we can all have it. That's what we do afterwards.
That's right.
Now, his response to Moses when he says, well, I threw this in the fire, he clearly says in Exodus 32, he bashed it. So he had some form of
That's right. That's right.
So we don't breathe deep, but we've got to be able to come out of it. And I hope that the Lord spares us to be able to do that.
That would be interesting to know. And
this is something we don't really know. With a lot of Bible characters, I know we've made this point before, but with so many Bible characters, we don't really know where they end up in eternity. Like, I don't know how God's going to judge Aaron. I know he messes up here. I know he messes up in a future story in just a little bit. But we don't know, how God's going to judge him. So that's not the point. But one thing you see in this story is he's confronted with his sin and he doubles down on it. He's confronted with his sin and he is not repentant. We make the point about with Saul and David. When Saul is confronted with his sin, he acts this way. When David was confronted with his sin, he says, I have sinned. There's a huge difference there. And at least in this moment, Aaron is the bad example. He's the example of somebody doubling down on the sin, making excuses for his sin, and flat out lying, as you pointed out. But he does seem to get back on track, and in a lot of ways, he seems to be a useful tool for the Lord, along the way. Moses, we've said, Moses pleads for him. Moses pleads for him, both here and in the stories where we keep pointing forward to, where Aaron and Miriam mess up again. Moses prays for them, both of them, which again tells us a lot about Moses. Remember Debbie, I can't remember her phrase exactly, but because of how close he was with Aaron, the betrayal, the failure of Aaron would have hit Moses so much harder. And yet he still prays for him, and he begs for God to be merciful, not only with the people, but specifically with Aaron.
It's just one of those that, yeah, this is extreme, this is shocking, but it is also on the other side of, we have our own extreme and shocking sin sometimes multiple times a day that we have to ask for forgiveness for, and we have to have that grace and mercy. This is just more extreme because, again, the leadership is a higher note here.
That's right. Yeah, it feels like there's so much to
think about there. Again, Jose, yes, sir.
Just one quick thing. Because we are doing all this revolving around the character of Moses, is the whole reason Aaron's in this position is because the burning bush, Moses was reluctant to see the vision that God had for him and trust in that. It was, well, I can't speak. So, okay, well, look, here's your brother Aaron. I can solve that problem. That, essentially, if Moses had just stepped up at the beginning, maybe there would have been a little more clear. I think, not saying that Aaron wouldn't do this again, and the same situation wouldn't take place, but it is interesting that a lot of Moses' reluctance originally is what kind of brought Aaron to a place of prominence.
That's interesting. Yeah, good point. Good thought.
Who's that? Yes, sir.
Also says,
Mm.
they're like their lights are behind the barriers. And his person, it's like this fellow, it's like, well, he's been with y'all for a long time. Should he not be a part of you? Moses uses language that talks about my people, things like that. They're using language that sort of separates him. And then they want to go to the golden calves, the gods, and they just want to separate. Their mindset is just turning away from God and the oneness with him, and they're separating themselves from God. And we see sin does that as a separate. Sin separates us from God, and so this language is literally separating them from God. They're doing it themselves.
I guess one thing would be interesting to speculate, and that's what
would be is just speculation. But what if the people had come to Aaron and said, "As for this man Moses, we don't know. Make us gods." What if Aaron had just hit his knees right then and said, "Lord, what do I do? What do I need to do, Lord? Tell me what to do." What if he had put his foot down? What if he had shown courage? They may have killed him. He may have gotten them to change their mind. He may have been able to hold the ground there, but they may have killed him. Then you get to this point where he's making excuses and he tells this lie. I get the feeling that when Moses hears this lie, verse 24, it hit him. I mean, the same way it hits up is like, oh, come on, Aaron. How can you say that? How can you claim that? Moses hears this lie, and you see, what happens next from verse 25 on. It's almost like he just walks away from Aaron. Just walks away from Aaron. If you're going to act that way, to me, maybe you've experienced something like this. That's right. This was an opportunity for Aaron to face the mistake and again to do the right thing, and he messes up again. There's a lot of application there for us, to think about ourselves in that situation. again, thinking about Moses' reaction here, if you're in a position where you're trying to help someone with their sin, and I think a lot of us find ourselves in that situation where we're trying to help somebody to pick up the pieces, and we hear something, like this, that's like, that's clearly not right. You're not taking ownership, of your sin. You're not taking ownership of your mistakes. To me, this is almost equivalent of shaking the dust off your feet. Like, it's not worth any more conversation. If that's where your mindset is at. And again, I can't help but just apply it to fatherhood. If I hear from my children the broken and contrite spirit, if I heard from my children the true sorrow for what they had done, then I'm going to react one way. And when I hear the excuses and the but he and but she, and like, well, now I'm going to react another way. That's how that's going to go down. And this is Moses, I think, at a crossroads. Is like, how are we going to? I already made them drink this. That's punishment number one. And now you react this way. You're still not taking this seriously enough. You still don't realize what you have done. And that takes us to kind of level two, punishment number two. There's probably more to say there. Let's go ahead and read this next section. Verse 25. Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." And the sons of Levi gathered around him. And he said to them, "Thus says the Lord, God of Israel, put your sword on your side, each of you, and go to and fro from the gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor." And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. And Moses said, "Today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one of you at the cost of his son and of his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day." So we've speculated a few different times, was Moses directed by the Lord to grind the calf up and make them drink? I think very important to this thought is, was Moses directed by the Lord to have them respond to this way with the sword? I tend to think that he was. I think that this would have been a huge leap for Moses to do on his own. But again, that's a little bit of speculation. He does say, verse 27, verse 26, who is on the Lord's side? And then verse 27, thus says the Lord God of Israel. That would have been fairly presumptuous to say if he hadn't had some kind of direction. But this seems very extreme, does it not? Seems very extreme. Also very personal. He doesn't tell them, take on your sword and go kill some strangers. Just go kill some people. Who does he tell them to kill? Brothers, friends, neighbors. That's right.
So maybe that is the Lord's. Just like when it was, can't remember the man's name at Jericho, that took the stuff.
Achan, thank you. The Lord ran them all through and brought it down to where they knew was family Achan, and maybe that's what happened here. We know the Lord can do that. Sure. Well, we know it could have been 30,000 and it still would have been merciful.
It could have been 1 million people dead and it still would have been merciful, because what they deserved was a complete wiping of the slate. That's what God, when he first is talking to Moses, that was what he says, is like, I'm just going to wipe them out. I'm done. And we made the point, I think God always kind of knew, he knew what Moses was going to do, and he knew what he was going to do. But this is merciful. That the killing of 3,000 seems so harsh to us, but this is God's mercy. This is his mercy at work. Darren first, and then
I've been saying is that God knew their hearts, every one of them. And maybe that's the 3,000 he knew that needed to be at this point.
That's right.
I can't.
And mine's more of a question, because it does say kill everyone and then only 3,000. And I don't know if anywhere else in the Bible, just ignorant of it, if it describes more of how they got to 3,000, because like you said, there's a lot more people here. That's a relatively small number compared to what it seems like rebelled. And so I was just wondering if anybody knew why it was that way, or.
I don't think we have any indication.
Hey, Sam.
It's not the end, though.
Yeah, and that kind of ties to when we were going through this with Terry, you know, because he says in the 29, at the cost of his son and his brother, Terry's implication was that the Levites really only killed those of the Levites, of their brethren. And the blessing in Deuteronomy 33 on Levi, in verse 9, it says, said to his father and mother, I regard them not as disowned his brothers, ignored his children, they observed your word, kept your covenant. That may seem to apply to this. And so that was the first time I'd ever heard it when Terry mentioned it in the class, that it was the Levites killing their own, and then they got a special blessing.
Yes,
here, the last thing.
You read the end of verse 29.
Killing the ones that rebelled essentially of the Levites.
That was what I got from his, or that it was like every 10 or whatever they slew. I can't remember exactly how he stated it, but it was the first time I ever
clearly
heard that.
describes them as the sons and brothers. So that makes a lot of sense. And then obviously you have none of the other tribes represented here. At least as far as girding on their sword, it's just the Levites who girded on their sword.
People, there would be a lot of camps, and it just says camps singular. There would be a lot of.
Yeah, it does that a lot. Though.
Yeah.
It does. That's why it's hard for me. But
I think the implication he had was, okay, think about the reason the Levites were chosen as the priest is they essentially represented all the firstborn. So when someone from Judah or Asher or whatever, they would redeem their firstborn. And so the Levites as a tribe stood for the firstborn, that perhaps that this was that representative thing. And to your point earlier, that is another show of the mercy of God, that here the Levites were going to be the only ones who are suffering this, what seems to be a random loss. And they're doing it on behalf of the people, representing the people.
That's right.
Like I said, it was an interesting thought he had, but
I think it's powerful. Did you have anything there?
Just a small little, something factual, is that we know God made a promise to Abraham. This has been hundreds of years from now. He told him he'd make a great nation of him. He'd give them a land, and that through his seed, all nations would be blessed. We do know that there's a remnant here.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and read this last section here in 32. The next day, Moses said to the people, "You have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written." But the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now go lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them." Then the Lord sent a plague on the people because they had made the calf, the one that Aaron had made. So I probably should have put on this point, this is Israel's third punishment. You know, you see that at the end, God sending a plague. It's interesting. A lot of times when God does something, we get specifics, we get numbers, and this one we don't. This is speculation, but the thought that has been made that this is the tribe of Levi that has some come and gird their sword, the tribe of Levi that loses fathers and sons, that maybe the plague is on the rest of the nation because that nation didn't gird on their sword. They didn't do anything, and so now the plague is still needed. That's speculation.
It's interesting, earlier in the story, when Moses, after Aaron's conversation, Moses read out, he says, "If you're with the Lord, come stand beside me." Apparently, other than the Levites, had the same option.
Yeah.
And did not choose to take it.
Yeah, there's several. Did Aaron gird on his sword?
Can you imagine being Aaron and you're the one who led the people in this? You're the one that didn't put your foot down. You're the one who just lied about this calf, and now you're going to put your sword on and go kill people who well, can you imagine? You would feel like a hypocrite, wouldn't you? I don't know. Martin says he hopes he was. Man.
He was the leader at this time, they had to, so he needs to accept that responsibility. It's like I said, well, the burden of the mission.
Yes, burden to realize. I guess teachers and preachers feel this a lot. I think where we're up here teaching a lesson that we know we need. I'm up here telling you something that I need just as much as you. And you feel sometimes like a hypocrite because I'm not up here because I'm better than anybody else. So I don't know. It's something powerful to think about. It's powerful to think about. God calls us to try to help people with their sin while we're also, removing beams from our own eye. We need to do that first. And it does, to Martin's point, it would definitely, I think he would feel the sting, knowing that he could have led them out of the sin instead of leading them into it.
All the proper type of shame that it should, then it could motivate him to do better. And in our lives, we have moments like that. And so that's what we should allow shame to do, is motivate us to do better.
It's interesting, after making them drink this thing, and then after the slaying of 3,000, Moses tells them in verse 30, you have sinned a great sin. He's still not letting it go. You could think, hey, I'm bearing this consequences. I'm bearing this consequence. Why can't you just let it go? Why can't you just let it go? It's like, well, you don't understand. You don't understand how serious this is. And again, that as we're trying to help our children, as we're trying to help other people, that's part, I think, of using wisdom is to make sure you can forgive somebody, you can forgive them and love them while still reminding them of their sin. Because we need to be reminded of our sin. We need to be reminded how serious sin is. The interaction between God and Moses here is just so powerful. Moses is going to go, verse 30, to make atonement. That's his goal. He offers himself. It's like, if you won't forgive them, then just blot me out of your book. And God tells him, basically, he tells him the soul that sins will die. He gives him that powerful message that Ezekiel will give so many years later. The soul that sins will die. That's the one who's going to be blotted out of my book. He describes visiting on them. Verse 34, I'm going to visit their sin upon them. Again, you have stages of punishment, stages of the consequences of your sin. I think all of us, or most of us, I would imagine, you've seen that in your life or in the lives of others, where consequences of sin don't go away just because you've been forgiven. Consequences of sin don't disappear just because God's forgiven you or your brethren's forgiven you. Sometimes the consequences of your sin come back and visit you, and that's just part of it. Part of it. That doesn't mean God hasn't forgiven you, and it doesn't mean that your brethren haven't forgiven you. That's just part of dealing with sin. One of the things we won't have time to get into, but look what he says, verse 34. Behold, my angel will go before you. Does that sound good or does that sound bad? Angels, ministers of fire. Okay. Is this a change or is this the same? Because we've had, pillar of fire, pillar of cloud. My angel will go before you. Doesn't that sound kind of like what's already been happening? Read with me just a second into the next chapter. He says that again in verse 2. He says, I will send my angel before you. I'm going to bring you into the land of milk and honey. Verse 3. Look what they say in verse 4.
So when the people heard this disastrous word, so he's going to send his angel before them. He's going to take them into the land flowing with milk and honey. And when the people heard this disastrous word,
Tell him, I'm not going with him, I'm going to send my angels. That's the context.
It's so easy to miss.
And they're saying, no, don't send a representative, you come with us.
That's right. That's right. So as we get into this next section, the covenant renewed, and we get into chapter 33, what the reason for this happening is God is telling them, I'm going to remove my presence. I'll still take you into the land. There'll be an angel in front of you. I'm not going to leave you alone, but I'm going to remove my presence. And a lot of this interaction that happens between Jehovah and Moses here, which is powerful stuff. We need to spend some time on chapter 33. It's because God has told them, I'm going to remove my presence, and Moses is begging him not to. The people look at this as a disastrous word, and we read over it without even thinking about it sometimes. So keep that in your mind as we get into chapter 33. I would ask you to try, I know it's longer readings, but try to read all of this. Try to digest all of this at once so we can talk about it without going verse by verse. All right, we'll stop now. We've got about 10, 12 minutes before our worship hour.
We decided to go. Yeah, it's smaller. I have